Welcome, everyone, to the Most Accurate Podcast. I'm Anthony Stalter. John Paulsen is my co-host, my partner in crime, as I like to say. And John, we have a lot to get to, a lot of injury news that we need to discuss. Thursday Night Football breakdown. Of course, we'll get into the sleepy. No, I did it again. Sleeper, sneaky start of the week. Come on. I was so focused on not saying sleepy. Sleeper, sneaky start of the week. Come on. How are you, John?
I'm doing pretty good. News breaking as we're getting ready to start the recording. So a lot to get to. And I did not have 1 minute as the over-under on you saying the sleepy start of the week. But there we are. The under one.
Unbelievable. I'm in my own head now. All right, we're currently running a promotion for F444.com that ends on Friday. New signups can save 25% of any 444 plan with promo code SUBTEMBER. Go to 444.com/plans. If you want to get a subscription and save 25% off the cost, it's great. You see the sub-tempered there at the bottom of the screen, 444.com/plans. You can get all of Giants rankings, all of the DFS betting, anything, all the content that we provide at 444.com. The paid stuff, it's tremendous. It'll help you, hopefully it'll help you win, or at least give you an edge when it comes to your research. So again, save 25% off a 444 subscription with the promo code SUBTEMBER at 444.com/plans. John, why don't we start off with the Thursday Night Football game? We want to get your takeaways on this. I'll run through a couple of things. Again, dealer's choice. You want to start with the winning side with the Bengals or the losing side with the Dolphins?
I mainly just want to talk about the Miami backfield. So go nuts.
Perfect. Okay, let's start off then with that the Dolphin side of things. Obviously, Tua Tagovailoa injured last night, dealing with a concussion. They suffered, he said he apparently suffered head and neck injuries in that game last night, taken directly to the hospital. Scary situation there for Tua. 8 for 14, 110 yards and an interception. Bridgewater steps in, 14 of 23, 193 yards, a touchdown and a pick. You go to the receiving side of things, no surprise. Tyreek Hill targeted 14 times, Jalen Waddle only 5 times. So if you got Jalen Waddle off to kind of a slower start, but Tyreek Hill 10 catches for 160 yards, no touchdowns. But as you mentioned, John, you want to dive into the backfield for Miami. Raheem Mostert, 15 attempts, 69 yards. Bridgewater with 1 carry for 11, and then Chase Edmonds, five attempts for 6 yards. Game script certainly wasn't in Miami's favor last night with the backfield. But what are your takeaways on the Dolphins?
Yeah, they're not all that interested in running the ball either, which was, I think, the biggest surprise coming into this season was that you would think that that they would be more of a run-heavy. Mike McDaniel came from San Francisco, so you would think they'd be more of a run-heavy attack like Kyle Shanahan utilizes there for the 49ers, but he's basically taking a very pass-centric approach and maybe signaled that with the acquisition of Tyreek Hill and really wanted to use the speed of Hill and Waddle and doing a good job, even though they didn't win this game. The offense looks pretty good. Obviously, Tua, we're thinking about him. Hopefully he's going to be okay. Really scary situation there last night. But the backfield for Miami, it looks like it's tilting pretty heavily now in Raheem Mostert's direction. Edmonds is getting some red zone inside the 10 type work, which is propping him up over the last 2 weeks. He had a touchdown this week on a nice little reception screen. He made a nice cut to score. But the 2 touchdowns last week didn't earn him any more snaps or touches in this game, unfortunately. And now we're at a point where he's being out-touched 17-7. He's out-snapped 72 to 28%. And Mostert even ran 27 routes to Edmonds' 11 routes. So this is all going Mostert's way. And Mostert is available on 50% of waiver wire. So I would pick him up if he's available. It does look like this is tilting his way right now. And I think Edmonds is a talented player. He's averaging 3.0 yards per carry. Mostert's averaging 3.8. The line is not run blocking very well. So they're pass blocking pretty well. And they're just throwing the ball a lot. So I don't think that it's going to turn into a really run-heavy attack anytime soon. And so Edmonds, he's more of a hold for me. I wouldn't want to start him in any given week unless I just, needed a spot start. He does have some touchdown potential, which is good. But we thought that he would get 4 or 5 catches per game because he's a really good pass catcher, and he also ran really well in zone attack last year, but that's just not working this year as well. So, it's odd to see a guy, getting paid $6 million, playing behind a guy that's getting paid $1 million when they both were signed in the same free agent class. But that's what's happening right now in Miami.
All right, I'll run through the Bengals really quickly, John. I don't know how much to take away here, but Joe Burrow, 20 of 31, 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Joe Mixon carried the ball 24 times, 61 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins was the main receiver, not Jamar Chase. He was targeted 9 times, 7 catches, 124 yards and a touchdown. So he absolutely went off. Hayden Hurst had the other receiving touchdown. Chase, decent line, 4 catches on 6 targets for 81 yards. Anything stand out from Cincinnati? Should we dive into the biggest fantasy storylines for this week?
It's just a major workload for Joe Mixon. I mean, 28 touches. It obviously wasn't very efficient, but if the owner or the manager in your league isn't happy with Mixon's production, it's not a bad time to try to acquire him. He's just getting a monster workload, and the big games are going to come.
All right, so John's Thursday night takeaways are behind us. Let's talk about this week's biggest fantasy storylines. And we'll start off with Christian McCaffrey. Anybody that has ever selected Christian McCaffrey in their leagues knows that you're dealing with injury situations. He's going to attempt to play, according to David Newton. What are your thoughts? So the hope is, and again, reminder, we're recording on Friday. John doesn't have all of the Friday injury news, so he's really, kind of parceling through some of the information that we do have. But John, Christian McCaffrey, what do you think here? His week 4, availability.
Well, it's a tough situation. Just coming back, and we have this language that they're using that they're very hopeful that he plays and that he's going to try to play and all this. And the fact that he was out of practice on Friday and still has all day Saturday, rest of the day today to recover and maybe get a little bit better. But the problem, I think, is that he plays, or the Panthers play in the late round of games on Sunday, so that presents some problems, lineup decisions. But there are a number of late game pivots that you could turn to. Fantasy managers might have on their roster, might be available on the waiver wire. I do think that, and it's not completely clear, but as of last week, Chuba Hubbard was ahead of Donta Foreman. The first 2 weeks, it seemed like Foreman was ahead of Hubbard. And I just saw a tweet from Michael Fabiano, who I've met. Nice man, nice gentleman. Used to work at NFL.com. Big fantasy name. He said he talked to multiple beat writers, and they believe Hubbard will get the first crack if CMC is out, but Donta Foreman will play a lot too. Could be a hot hand scenario, and that's sort of what I thought yesterday when I was looking at this, that Hubbard and Foreman would form a committee. Foreman was better last year in terms of yards per carry and all that, did well for the Titans and does have some pass catching ability. Hubbard obviously had a pretty sizable role for Carolina with CMC out last year. But so I would, if I had to pick up one, I would pick up Hubbard. Both players are probably worth a stash in really large leagues just to see what sort of happens with this. But I would lean Hubbard. And if you're, waiting on CMC, I would definitely wait and see if he can play. If he's active, I think they'll maybe not his usual workload, but he'll see 18 plus touches. It's just hard not to, unless he gets injured mid game or has a setback mid game.
All right, so the Lions are dealing with some major injury issues here. We kind of knew DeAndre Swift unlikely to play, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's dealing with an ankle injury. He's already been ruled out, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN.com. Doesn't look good at all for the Lions. Who are you targeting then when it comes to the Lions passing game situation?
Yeah, with Swift and St. Brown out, that's a lot of targets for the Lions, and I think the guys that pick up the slack are probably Josh Reynolds, who's relatively healthy. DJ Chark has been missing practice Wednesday and Thursday, but is going to be out of practice today apparently, and should be okay according to the early reports there from the beat writers as far as the Friday reports. So if he's questionable and he practices today, I feel pretty good about Chark. And then TJ Hawkinson is the other guy who probably sees an uptick in targets. And I wouldn't be too scared of this game if you're wanting to start some of these players. It's at home, friendly confines for Detroit. The matchup against the Seahawks is really favorable. So I think there's enough for Jared Goff with Chark, Reynolds, Hawkinson, Jamal Williams, a pretty good pass catcher. It'd be probably okay to start some of these Lions. Josh Reynolds certainly gets a big bump since he's healthy and has shown a pretty good rapport with Jared Goff.
All right, let's move on to the Saints injury situation. Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is ruled out. Winston is doubtful. What's the shakeup in New Orleans? Because it's an early game. It's London. It's the London game.
Yeah, it's London.
So you got to make your decision very quickly here.
Yeah. With Thomas out, in theory, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, and I would say Traquan Smith probably is in the lead there for that third spot. He played well. He had a concussion, I think, but he was back at practice. Deontay Hardy, formerly Deontay Harris, people remember from last year, he changed his last name. He's working his way back from a foot injury. Marquez Callaway is the other guy there. But I think it would be Olave, Landry, and Traquan Smith in 3 receiver sets with Andy Dalton throwing the ball. I looked up Andy Dalton's deep ball accuracy, Anthony, at PFF, and it's not good. Last year,
I have a better deep ball accuracy, and you haven't even seen me play. Yeah,
last in the league last year, 38 out of 38 qualified quarterbacks in deep ball accuracy, adjusted completion percentage, basically. So, and then the year before, he was a little bit better. He was, bottom quarter, and then he's dropped a long way since his days in Cincinnati when he was a pretty competent deep ball thrower. So, I say all that to the fact that Chris Olave leads the league by a wide margin in air yards, even though some of them were prayer yards from Jameis Winston. You're probably not going to hit too many deep balls to him, but he can run routes all over the field. He's an excellent route runner. He's not like a one-trick pony or anything like that. So there is the argument that Dalton's accuracy is a little bit better than Winston's, so that might be an upgrade for him. And then also just Michael Thomas being sidelined really shifts a lot of targets, or could shift a lot of targets to these other players, and Olave may benefit from that. So I think it really isn't too much of a downgrade for him, given all this news together. So Winston out, Thomas out, one's good for him, one's probably bad for him, but it's probably a net wash or maybe a little bit of an upgrade for him since Thomas is out. Jarvis Landry probably will get peppered with targets, and Traquan Smith's kind of a wild card in that passing attack.
Before we get to some injury roundup, including some good news for anybody that is a fantasy manager of Cordero Patterson, I wanted to ask you, John, about your guy, Romeo Doubs. So is he now the number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay?
Yeah, his audition for the wide receiver 1 job went very, very well. He caught 8 of 8 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown against a pretty good Buccaneers secondary, some talented cornerbacks there he was running routes against. Had a nice rapport with Aaron Rodgers, which, as we know, is the most important thing if you're going to be a Packer receiver. It certainly looks pointed that direction, and as long as he doesn't do something stupid or make a big mistake that costs him a game, run the wrong route a couple times, or start dropping the ball consistently, then he looks like he's in line. I mean, I think Allen Lazard is safer because of we know what his role is. Like, he's going to be out there.
Right.
Dobbs being the rookie with, Sammy Watkins coming back in a few weeks, Christian Watson coming back. Maybe he's on a little bit thinner ice, but talent-wise, he looks the part. I think he passes the eye test really well. That game against the Bucs could not have gone better for him, I don't think. I mean, that was about as good as you could expect. He played a ton of snaps, and he led the team in targets and yards, and basically looked the part. So, I think he's headed that direction, number 1 receiver.
All right, let's do kind of an injury roundup now. We talked about DeAndre Swift a little bit. He's going to be out. Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, David Montgomery, Keenan Allen limited in practice on Thursday, left with the trainer. Hunter Renfrow still in the concussion protocol. He did not practice this week. Cordero Patterson, though, did not have practice in back-to-back weeks, but as soon as right before we signed on, John, the Falcons did release, or somebody released, that Cordell Patterson did practice today. So it looks like he will play against Cleveland. I threw out those names, John: Swift, Jones, Wilson, Montgomery, Allen, and then Hunter Renfrow. Some thoughts there?
Yeah, Mac Jones probably going to be out. We're looking at Brian Hoyer starting against the Packers. Can't say that I'm too upset about that spot start for Hoyer.
I don't know. Jones have been thrown. I mean, his interceptions have been brutal. He's turned the ball over a lot, but I see what you're saying there about Brian Hoyer.
Yeah. I guess it wouldn't be bad if Mac Jones was out there on his, gimpy ankle trying to, evade the Packer pass rush. But
yeah,
Zach Wilson looks like he's going to be back this week. They're planning on him starting. This is going to change the makeup of this passing attack. Obviously, Joe Flacco's been a big fan of Garrett Wilson and Tyler Conklin. We'll see if any of that changes. I'll talk about another one of those receivers in a minute. David Montgomery looks like he's going to miss. He's got not only an ankle injury, but also a knee injury, apparently. So Khalil Herbert looks like a great start. And then Keenan Allen, he was limited in practice on Thursday, but left early with a trainer. And we don't know if that was something that was planned or if it was a setback of some sort, like, we need to get you off the field and take a look at this. So we'll see what he's able to do today. It was pointing towards him playing, but now I'm a little bit worried about that. With Renfrow still in the concussion protocol, this is at least his second concussion. I looked at his injury history, and he had one in 2018. And growing up playing football, he probably had more than is what is listed on the internet for me to find. But these concussions, if they're not back early the week after they miss, they typically are going to miss another week because they're not getting cleared in time. If he's out, then Mac Hollins looks like another sneaky start. He obviously had a great week last game and would be startable again. And then, as you mentioned, Patterson, I think is the veteran. I think he's 32, Anthony, if I'm not mistaken. And he's going to get some time off, and he's going to get banged up with this workload that he's getting. I'm not sure he's going to be able to hold up, but if he's practicing on Friday, I'm pretty sure he'll be out there.
Yeah, he didn't last year. To your point, he didn't last year. He started to fade. It was something that you and I talked about on this very podcast a year ago. But what a dynamic player, man! Arthur Smith, credit Arthur Smith. He finally, he's been the one guy that has figured out how to properly use Cordell Patterson. But as you mentioned, man, second half, we'll see what happens there. All right, John, it's time for the sleeper sneaky start of the week. That's right, the sleeper sneaky start of the week. I finally did that, John. I'm sure I'll mess it up 42 times moving forward, but Sleeper is one of the fastest growing customizable fantasy football platforms in the industry. You can head to sleeper.com or download the latest app today. Very easy to use the app, very easy to use the website. There's always some familiarity that you need to kind of overcome, but when it comes to Sleeper, we use it in our league. In fact, as John and I discussed, Amon St. Brown, I had to change him off my team real quick, and it's easy to use, easy to pick up players. John, you and I really like Sleeper.
Yes, good website. A couple leagues I play in, very sleek. Nice place to host your league, and it's free, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, so the sleeper sneaky start of the week. Who do you got for us, John?
I'm going to go with Jamal Williams. I'd like to go with a kind of a can't miss guy here. Now that I said can't miss, he probably posts 15 carries for 45 yards and no touchdowns. But we talked about the Lions passing game injuries, and maybe they lean a little bit more on the run with Williams and Craig Reynolds as the backup. The Seahawks have given up an average of 170 total yards and 0.67 touchdowns to opposing backfields this far this season. In 25 games where Jamal Williams has seen at least 12 carries, he's averaged 18.3 touches for 88 total yards and 0.44 touchdowns. And I think those touchdowns are a little low. He's scoring touchdowns even when DeAndre Swift is available and healthy. So I think he's a threat for 1 to 2 touchdowns this game. So I think he's a really strong start. That's why I have him, I think, ranked 7th right now in half PPR formats.
So this is always one of my favorite segments that we do each and every week, sneaky starts. We list a couple for you here in this podcast. I always say, go to 44.com. We mentioned the fact that you can get 25% off a subscription. We'll, make sure that you use that, because as part of John's rankings that you get in the subscription to 4for4.com. You also get the complete article that John puts together for his sneaky starts. These are guys that might be off the radar a little bit. John, you always throw it out there like you're trying to find guys that would provide you some value. Sometimes you get pushback like, well, it's not a sneaky start. It's like easy. All right. You can use it for long-term fantasy. I use it for DFS every single week when I'm putting together some DFS lineups that I want to make sure that I grab a couple of guys that aren't, they might be underpriced. I always look at John's article. So this is just his taste. Go to 4for4.com for the complete article. But let's start off with the quarterback, Geno Smith at Detroit Lions. As you can see from the graphic, not too great against quarterbacks.
Yeah, and he's actually Smith's been pretty good. Solid anyway. He's got quality numbers against Denver, 17.2 fantasy points. He had 18.9 fantasy points against your Falcons. Detroit is typically a good defense to attack when streaming. They've played a little bit better this year, but they've given up an average of 23.6 fantasy points with a minimum of 18.3 to quarterbacks this year, and that was Kirk Cousins last week with 18.3. So a pretty good spot for Geno Smith, I think, against the Lions.
Richie James, not a household name, but you list him here as a sneaky start against the Bears.
Yeah, you look at this Giants. You want to talk about the Giants receiving core, Anthony? Should we dedicate an entire podcast to this receiving core with poor Sterling Shepard tearing his ACL after he's coming off of Achilles tear? Kenny Galladay can't catch the ball all of a sudden, barely getting any run. Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney are both injured. Darius Slayton is in the doghouse. It's ugly. And Richie James has been playing, 70% of the snaps in 2 of the last 3 weeks. He's seen at least 5 targets and caught 4 passes in every game thus far. And who else are they going to play or throw to? They seem to like him, and he's going to be this 5 for 50 type guy. Maybe he gets a touchdown.
And then as we move on, sneaky starts, let's talk about Tyler Conklin at Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, despite having a very good defense, they're struggling right now with tight ends.
Yeah, a little bit. 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends so far. Conklin's volume has just been crazy. I liked him as a last round best ball pick, but I really should have him in a couple of these leagues where I'm struggling at the tight end position because I didn't get my stud that I like to usually get. I like to target Kelsey or Andrews. Obviously, in our keeper league, I don't have those guys available to me. And I took I've got Irv Smith and Albert O, and Irv's okay, but it would be nice to have Conklin right now. I kind of saw him after week 1 and thought about picking him up. It was just maybe this is 1 week. He's sort of a catch it and fall down type guy. His air yards aren't there, but it doesn't matter. He's got 18 catches through 3 weeks. He's got 24 targets, which is tied for the 3rd most at his position. Now, the one caveat here is that Zach Wilson might do something completely different than what Joe Flacco has been doing. And Flacco's been, targeting Garrett Wilson a lot, Tyler Conklin a lot, and the running backs quite a bit. And we'll talk about Elijah Moore in a second. But so Conklin may not have quite the same role with Wilson in there, but he's going to be playing a ton. He's way ahead of CJ Uzomah, and he's a pretty good sneaky start this week if you're streaming the tight end position.
Well, John, you just mentioned Elijah Moore. So we wanted to discuss the breakout receiver model. And this is something that we have discussed on previous podcasts before. I don't think we've done it yet. Maybe we did it week 1, John, of this season. Maybe not. No. So
this is the first week we have all the data. Let me just break this down.
Yeah.
We debut this in week 4 because now we have 3 weeks of data. It's a model that I built with Kevin Zatlukal, and it basically looks at receivers who have been underperforming the workload that they've been receiving and the usage that they've been receiving. It takes into account air yards and routes run in order to come up with an expected fantasy points scored. Sam Hoppen, who's doing a lot of data work for us, also has expected points scored model that he's got as well, but I think both can coexist on the website. I'm going to try to get this table up. We're trying to find somebody to write the article this year. We've lost our writer for it, but we're I'm looking for ways to at least get the data out to the subscribers at a minimum, and then maybe we could talk about it every Friday. A few players that I like, or what the model likes. So the model likes Elijah Moore is one of the players. I'm going to mainly talk about players who you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to start or sit him based on. So maybe not guys that are ranked necessarily in the top 10 at their position, although we are going to talk about one tight end that is. But Elijah Moore is leading the Jets in air yards, which might surprise people because Garrett Wilson has more targets and obviously a better receiving yardage at this point. But Moore is averaging 106 air yards per game. He did jibe pretty well with Zach Wilson late last year. It wasn't great at the start, but towards the end of the year, they got going together. So I'm hoping that this is a breakout week for Elijah Moore. Another player, Kyle Pitts. This model does do a good job with tight ends. He's obviously been a disappointment for the most part, but he did get going a little bit last week for his fantasy managers. He's second among tight ends in air yards per game at 94. So the usage is there. He's just got to hit one or two of these and maybe get a touchdown. And then all of a sudden people will be happy with Kyle Pitts. This might be the week for that. Mike Williams is another player who has kind of underperformed his usage thus far this season. He did have the one big game. But looking at this Keenan Allen injury, if he's ruled out or really gimpy, then I think Williams does have a chance to break out this week, especially in a nice matchup against the Texans. And then finally, we mentioned Josh Reynolds earlier with the injury to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I haven't updated the rankings yet because news broke right before we got on the pod. But he and DJ Chark are going to move up in the rankings, and he's the one that's actually healthy compared to Chark. So they're both actually in the model, popping in the model as underperformers that could break out. So I wouldn't be surprised if they both went for 70 and a touchdown against the Seahawks.
Nice. Great stuff, John, as always. And you can follow John on Twitter at 444_John, or you can follow me at Anthony Stalter. That information right down there on our great graphic screen. And John, always a pleasure to chat with you. Don't forget, we've got that 25% off deal that we have for 444.com. Just use the promo code SUBTEMBER. Go to 444.com/plan. So they're right there again, right there on the graphic. You can get John's rankings. You can get DFS articles. You get betting articles. You get, of course, the season-long articles. You can get the breakout model data. John, sorry, did you post the data, or are we working on that? I know you said
I will by the time that the podcast posts. Okay. I need to figure out a way to get this up on the site in a way that people can read it.
Right. Okay. So all that information is there at 444.com. Basically, all the information to put you in the right spot to win week to week, or at least as consistently as possible, and then maybe also do some good damage in DFS as well. We will be back next Friday in the Most Accurate Podcast. Make sure you continue to provide us support. We're seeing really good numbers on this. This is the first time that we've gone to kind of a video aspect of it, so I hope people are enjoying it. But most of all, we can't thank you enough for subscribing, for listening, for watching, and we certainly appreciate you. So everybody have a great weekend. John, great weekend. Good luck in our fantasy league. I don't know if we've played each other yet, so I don't know if we've got that battle going yet.
Yeah, we'll have to preview the matchup when it happens.
People will love it. I'm sure we'll dedicate an entire podcast to just you and I. So people love that. All right. For John Paulsen, I'm Anthony Stalter. We'll see you next time on the Most Accurate Podcast.